Welcome to Module 6 of the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Training Programme, funded by the Food and Drink Wales. This training is designed to help Welsh food and drink manufacturers consider and adapt to the impacts of climate change. Each module is supported by a handbook which contains more information and links to templates which you can use for your climate adaptation planning. This module is all about the financial and legal implications of climate change. We'll explore how these risks affect food and drink businesses in Wales and the practical steps you can take to adapt. Take a moment to consider how confident you currently feel about your business's financial resilience to climate shocks. In this module, we'll look at how climate change impacts may affect the financial position of a business and some of the good practices to put in place to mitigate these financial risks. We will introduce you to cost-benefit analysis, a management tool which can help you assess financial decisions and investments. We will look at how green finance might be able to help you with these climate-conscious investments. We'll also focus on insurance, which should be your last line of defence. We'll also look at cash preservation strategies that you could deploy if you suffer a major climate incident and have to move into business survival mode. We will also run through some of the legal and regulatory issues you need to consider. And finally, we will look at business continuity planning in the context of climate change. Let's make a start on considering the impact of climate change on your business finances. What's the biggest financial shock your business has faced in the past 5 years? How did you handle it? Are there learnings that you could apply to your climate-conscious approach to business finance? Before we look at the specific financial risks which your business might be facing, it's worth taking a moment to understand how central banks categorize the financial stability risks associated with climate change. Physical risks are growing due to the increased frequency and severity of climate shock events. Transitional risks are those associated with the costs of decarbonizing and shifting to a lower carbon future. And liabilities arise from claims from people or businesses seeking compensation for losses they may have suffered from the physical or transitional risks of climate change. These three categories of risk result in an exposure to risk. For example, the cost of recovery from a climate event, the risk of stranded assets, which we'll cover later in this module, and loss of current or potential business. Now let's take a more detailed look at some of the specific financial risks to your food or drink business. For example, if you're unable to produce or deliver orders, then customers won't be paying for them and may look for alternative suppliers. So even when you come out of whatever climate interruption you have dealt with, you may not be able to rely on these customers to stay loyal to you. With banks and fund providers increasingly looking at climate risks, failure to adapt to these risks may make finance more expensive. Your credit score could be compromised if your balance sheet weakens or a business interruption means you take longer to pay your creditors. Negative press coverage can also reduce your credit score. This may make it harder for you to raise finance. Your reserves may be depleted by climate incidents, perhaps through loss of revenue and profit or through needing to fund adaptations such as flood defences or uninsured damage to your food or drink factory. A climate shock event could seriously impact your cash flow when money going out exceeds money coming in, and then to restart you may have even more outgoings in the form of purchases of ingredients, packaging, raw materials and labour costs before your cash starts coming in. Take a moment here to consider if your production stopped for 2 weeks. How long could your business survive before cash flow became critical? So, having thought about how climate events can affect your business's finances, let's look at some of the risks that you'll need to assess. Climate events have the scope not only to disrupt your business continuity in the immediate term, but they can also undermine your future plans by diverting funds and management focus from business growth. Here are a few questions to start considering the financial implications of climate-related incidents. How long would it take for your cash flow to be depleted and the associated going concern risks that may occur? If you had to use your reserves to repair and rebuild for recovery, what investment plans would be disrupted, and how long might it take for insurance payouts to be received? How do you ensure that your investments are climate conscious and provide you with a return and avoid the risk of stranded assets? Can you show that you are adapting to climate risks to reassure potential fund providers that you are a safe bet, or to make sure your insurance remains affordable? Are you monitoring your business's creditworthiness, which will help you to raise money if you need to? One adaptation you could make is to extend your due diligence processes to suppliers. You may already do this when starting business with a new customer, as you may be negotiating trade terms and you want to make sure they are a good credit risk. Ongoing monitoring of the credit ratings of your suppliers is sensible as climate-related incidents become more frequent and severe. A falling credit rating might be an early warning that your supplier is in a vulnerable trading position, and a climate-related incident might push them over the edge. And if they are no longer able to trade, you may find yourselves without the essential raw materials or having to find alternative supplies at short notice and in a tight market. Various companies offer the facilities to check credit ratings or paid monitoring services, which allow you to create a dashboard to track businesses of interest. And don't forget to monitor your own credit score and try to maintain a low or very low risk score, as this will put you in a stronger position to raise finance and secure your own beneficial trade terms with your customers. Don't let payment disputes get out of hand, as a county court judgment against you for even a small debt could result in a drop in your credit score. And do keep an eye on your accounting housekeeping. Failing to file your statutory accounts at Companies House will result in your credit score dropping to 0. So when was the last time you checked your supplier's credit ratings? Moving on to investment decisions, it may seem difficult to justify expenditure on climate adaptations when you have many other business and investment priorities. By conducting a thorough cost-benefit analysis, you can make informed choices to improve flexibility and reduce the impact of climate change. A cost-benefit analysis involves assessing the economic benefits and the cost of adaptation measures compared to not taking any action. The benefits are the avoided damage costs and any ancillary benefits following the implementation of adaptation measures, whereas the adaptation costs are the costs of planning, preparing for, facilitating and implementing adaptation measures. The starting point is to understand the context, which in this case is climate change impact. Use your climate risk knowledge gained via this training to identify the specific risks affecting your business. For example, is your factory in a flood risk area? What are the adaptation measures which will mitigate those risks? In the case of flooding, you might be assessing an investment in flood defences or relocating your factory out of the flood risk area. Then assess the costs. Include the direct costs, for example, infrastructure construction, maintenance, and operational costs. And don't forget to include indirect and secondary costs such as administrative expenses. This investment decision might involve an opportunity cost. For example, investing in flood defences may mean you need to put off another investment, and therefore you should include the value of that lost opportunity. If the delayed investment was for a production line which would help you to secure another trade customer, what is the approximate value of that customer? You should include this as the opportunity cost of investing in the flood defences. Now you can evaluate the benefits. What are the avoided losses? In our flood defence example, these would be the costs of the post-flood cleanup operations, the loss in revenue, the penalties that customers charge for non-fulfillment of orders, the wage bill of employees who were not able to work, the costs of the loan that you might need to take to reopen your factory, and the costs of any future increases in insurance premiums. You can extrapolate the benefits over a period of time. For example, your flood defences may be operational and robust for 15 years, and therefore the benefits extend to that period. Also consider whether there are any ancillary impacts. Will your flood defences help protect the local water quality, as there will be no post-flood water pollution? These ancillary benefits can be hard to quantify, but nevertheless they are important to acknowledge in a cost-benefit analysis. Here we've shown a simplified model for a potential investment in our flood barrier protections. The top half of the spreadsheet shows the benefits, which are the anticipated cost savings and cost avoidance. Perhaps this investment will reduce your insurance premiums by £2,000 a year. You may avoid cleanup and rectification costs as well as costs incurred to replace damaged stock. The revenue line represents the turnover that you have protected, and in year 3 you think that you will accrue an additional ancillary benefit that should be included in your calculations. Turning to the costs, the upfront investment is £50,000 in year 1, then you have ongoing maintenance at £2,000 per year. Clearly, year 1 shows a negative position with a net cost of £47,000, but not the full £52,000 year 1 costs, as we can deduct the year 1 benefits. Years 2 to 5 show a positive net benefit of investing in the flood protections, with an overall net benefit over the 5-year period of £9,000. So this simplified model suggests that an investment in flood barriers offers a net positive benefit and therefore stands up to scrutiny. Of course, when we think about the investments we need to make in our food or drink businesses, we need to think about how to fund those investments. Will you use the reserves in your business, or will you seek to raise external finance? In recent years, a new category of business finance known as green finance has emerged. The UK government defines this as any structured financial activity, a product or service that has been created to ensure a better environmental outcome. Within this type of finance, green asset finance is designed to fund the purchase of equipment and vehicles to help you achieve your sustainability goals. Green finance may be available for climate adaptations from both public or commercial funding sources, and many of the high street and online banks offer some sort of green finance. There are also ethical banks which focus on lending to businesses with strong environmental or ethical credentials. And it is worth noting that some supermarkets have introduced supply chain finance initiatives which incentivize environmental good practices through cheaper rates or improved payment terms. And don't forget that all these types of activities will help the lenders and fund providers reduce their Scope 3 carbon emissions. There are also public funding sources which may offer soft loans and grants. Here in Wales, the Development Bank of Wales oversee a green business loan scheme aimed at reducing carbon emissions and helping businesses save on future energy bills. If a climate shock event occurs which causes damage to your business, you are likely to look to your insurance cover to help you recover from the incident. The Association of British Insurers highlighted that in 2023, businesses in the UK claimed around £443 million on their insurance due to weather damage. Given this reliance on insurance, it is important to review your insurance cover to ensure it covers you what you think it covers, and you don't run the risk of an unknown exposure after the climate event. You may have a variety of business insurance policies, but you would be wise to read the small print and scrutinize the policies to ensure that you are adequately covered for climate-related events. These are some of the points to consider. What climate-related events are you covered for, if any, and are there any exclusions? What are your excess levels? Are you covered new for old? Check your business interruption insurance. Are you covered only for damage or because people can't get into your premises? Does the cover extend to loss of business because of interruptions to supply chains? It's important to understand these nuances. If you are only covered for damage to your business, meaning you have to stop operations, this insurance won't be adequate for a supply chain disruption, which means you can't produce your products and therefore have to stop production. In modules 3 and 4, we talked about the importance of your up-to-date asset register. Maintaining this with photos as well as detailed descriptions will be vital in supporting your post-climate event insurance claim, as it will provide evidence about your assets in their pre-climate event state. Adaptation measures that you take might help reduce your insurance premiums, so it's worth discussing them with your insurer. If you have to make a claim, you will now have the knowledge to make resilient reinstatements or adaptations. For example, achieving a higher standard of resilience by moving electrical points above a potential flood level. Remember, insurance is your safety net, but not your first line of defense. So take a moment to consider whether your current insurance really covers the risks you face, or could you be facing uninsured losses and damage? It's worth highlighting how good financial management practices before a climate incident could help you secure your route out of a climate shock event. For example, being able to share 12 months' worth of robust management accounts before the incident will demonstrate the inherent health of the business, which will help you to access external funding such as a loan to get you back into production. Or there may be a short window of opportunity to apply for some sort of government recovery grant or soft loan that may be available to help a badly affected region to emerge from a climate disaster. You want to be in the best possible position to apply for such a scheme and have all the information to hand. So let's take a deeper look at how you might preserve cash if you suffer from a climate incident. Some cash can be thought of as enabling cash. This is cash or spending which helps to get you back up and running. For example, salary costs. You may decide to or have to continue to pay staff through a temporary closure. The positive outcome of this means they are available to help get the factory back up and running. They don't have to worry about losing their job, and you don't have to restart your business with a depleted workforce. Secondly, payments for any immediate repairs, rectification, or positive release costs which may be incurred before insurance claims are settled. You will also need to have working capital to purchase materials, ingredients, packaging, etc. in order to be able to return to production. Think about your debtors and creditors. Who owes you money, how much, and when is it due? What might be at risk because you can't deliver orders? Or could you call in payments from your customers ahead of terms to help with cash flow? Who do you owe money to? How much and when is it due? Do you know your suppliers well enough that you could ask for a payment holiday? If you are paying down a loan, your bank might be prepared to offer a payment holiday to get you back up and running and in a stronger position to repay your debt in the longer term. What discretionary spending is planned? Are there items which could be cancelled, postponed, or reduced? Think about your contracts. Are there any terms that you have committed to, and could there be any penalties you might face for non-delivery? Do you need to put in more rigorous controls in place for cash flow management? For example, daily updates to cash flow rather than weekly, reducing your daily limits for outgoing cash, strengthening authorization procedures for expenditure. In normal terms, you might be happy that invoices under a certain threshold only need one authorizer, but you might want to change this to 2 authorizers when you are trying to protect cash. These are all actions you can take to stop cash leaving the business at a time of crisis. To finish this section on finances, it's worth taking a moment to consider the risks of stranded assets. Failing to consider climate change risks when you invest in items such as new sites, buildings, structures, machinery and equipment, IT infrastructure and business systems leaves you at risk of those assets being stranded and no longer contributing to business success. This slide gives you a few examples of how assets can become stranded, perhaps because they have been superseded by new technology or are too energy intensive and therefore too expensive to run and making you uncompetitive in the marketplace. Perhaps the asset you invested in is only capable of processing certain types of raw materials or packaging formats that are now unavailable, too expensive, or fallen out of favour with customers and consumers. Or your buildings have become uninsurable due to climate shock or stress events. Taking a climate-smart approach and fully considering climate factors when making your investment plans could help you avoid locking in future problems and reduce the risk of being left with stranded assets. Now let's turn to the legal implications of climate change. It's worth remembering the legal duties of company directors as set out in the Companies Act, as they are relevant in the context of climate change and understanding threats and risks and taking reasonable steps to address these. All company directors are subject to these legal duties regardless of the size of the company. Directors have a duty to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence. They must also have a regard to the likely consequences of any decision in the long term. And critically, directors should be sure that the company will be able to continue as a going concern and can pay its debts as they fall due. Wales's food and drink industry is mainly made up of micro and small businesses which do not face mandatory climate risk reporting. However, growing businesses need to be aware that there are further sustainability and risk reporting requirements that they may be subject to, depending on their turnover levels. Another piece of relevant legislation is the Health and Safety at Work Act, which you will all be familiar with. This places a legal duty on any company with 5 or more employees to have a written record of their health and safety policy and must make employees aware of such policies. Reflect on the climate change impacts that we highlighted in Module 1. Higher temperatures, more extreme heat, storms, intense rainfall, and think about how these might need to be factored into your health and safety policies and procedures. For example, do you need to include additional breaks if temperatures breach certain limits, or carry out climate-specific risk assessments on vulnerable persons? We will explore this area in more detail in Module 7 when we look at the potential climate impacts on staff. This duty of care extends to ensuring safe working conditions for staff and other persons, including visitors and contractors, in respect of climate-related risks. In 2024, the British Safety Council urged all employers to conduct climate risk impact analyses on their businesses, including extreme weather, an increase in biological risk, and increased risk of accidents. We've highlighted how heat waves are becoming more common. Whilst there are no minimum or maximum temperatures defined by the Health and Safety at Work Act, there is a code of practice which suggests minimum temperatures for working indoors. There is no specified maximum working temperature, but heat is classed as a hazard and therefore heat risks need to be assessed, and particularly for individuals who may be suffering from conditions which put them at more risk from heat stress. Another relevant legal area to consider covers any sustainability claims you may be making. Any green claims must comply with the fundamental legal principle of not misleading consumers. In the UK, the Competitions and Market Authority has the lead role and consumer protection law powers to protect consumers from unfair business practices and contract terms. The CMA has created the Green Claims Code, which sets out the principles for making environmental claims about goods and services. They have established the 6 principles shown on this slide and have developed a set of questions that every business should ask themselves regarding any claim they intend to make. The CMA website has some very clear and helpful advice as to what is and what is not a legally compliant claim, along with case studies which include examples of food products. Advice and support regarding claims is also available in your area from your local Trading Standards Department, and advice may be given under the Primary Authority Legal Partnership Scheme. In Module 5, we highlighted how useful horizon scanning is, and upcoming legislation should be part of your horizon scanning topic areas. This is a snapshot from an IGD publication and is a very helpful summary of the regulatory and policy landscape, and shows the key thematic areas of health, sustainability, and economics. Being prepared for new legislation and policy areas could help you with your climate adaptation planning. Having looked at financial and legal considerations, let's move on to business continuity planning. Before we start though, take a moment to consider if a climate-related incident happened tomorrow, would your business continuity plan hold up, or does it need revisiting? Many of you will be familiar with the business continuity plan, particularly if you are BRC accredited. These may focus on disruptions such as product recalls, supplier failure, utility or IT failure. We're going to look more holistically at business continuity planning and why it's important. Threats can come from a wide range of sources: climate change, cybercrime, infrastructure failures, supply chain failures, and, of course, pandemics. Your business continuity plan is designed to protect your business, your people, and your assets in order that you can get back up and running as quickly as possible. Being prepared boosts your resilience when the unexpected happens. Let's take a moment to consider some of the impacts from a climate-related business interruption. There are direct financial ones, such as interrupted cash flows, the costs of replacing damaged equipment or stock, increased insurance premiums, and depletion of reserves. But the reputational impacts can be far-reaching and pervasive. Customers may lose confidence in you and switch to an alternative supplier. Consumers may do the same. Recruitment could be more challenging if your business is perceived to be a risky one. Whilst you may not know what specific interruption or crisis you might have to face, making a plan in advance is good business practice. Trying to make decisions in the middle of a crisis is not the best time. Thinking through in advance allows you to consider your options calmly and in detail, and imagine yourself in that situation. Others in your team can help you prepare the plan and any resources you need. Take time to train your team and test the procedures. Have you rehearsed your business continuity plan with your team? We've broken the business continuity plan down into 5 distinct phases, and there are different actions and decisions to be taken at the different phases, and we'll go through these on the next few slides. The first phase is the actual day of the incident, then the immediate recovery, which is day 1, and then the first week of recovery followed by week 2 recovery. And finally, you'll reach the long-term recovery phase. Of course, the length of each phase and the time it takes to recover depends very much on the incident itself, so this is just a guide. There are a number of resources or information that you can gather and prepare in advance. For example, you should already know the evacuation routes and assembly points. In an earlier module, we highlighted the importance of maintaining an up-to-date asset register. You should have information about live equipment or hazards, and up-to-date contact lists for staff, service providers, key customers, insurance, and finance providers. Another useful document to pre-prepare is your communications cascade plan, which sets out who communicates with who to ensure messages are managed and consistent. Can you be confident that you have all these resources to hand if your factory was hit by an incident tomorrow? The matrix on this slide shows some of the templates to use at the different stages of your recovery plan. Also, what key contacts you might need at the different stages, and who you will need to communicate with. Links to the templates we refer to can be found in the Module 6 workbook. Thinking about the day of the incident, the immediate action checklist guides you through some of the actions. What is happening? Do you need to implement your business continuity plan? Log actions and the decisions you make. Trigger the evacuation plan if needed. Make sure everyone is safe and contact family members. What do you need to do to secure your site assets and render everything as safe as possible? Who do you need to communicate with and what do you tell them? And when will you give the next update? And who do you need to contact to start the recovery process? There are 4 key areas to consider in the immediate aftermath, starting on day 1 after the incident. The first key area to consider is what essential parts of your business, in terms of processes and equipment, will be needed within 24 hours. If any of the equipment is damaged and therefore can't be used within a day, is there an alternative? And who will organise the restart of those processes and equipment? The second key area to consider are the essential roles that you'll need within 24 hours. Who are the role holders? What if they're not available? Who else can do those roles, and can they be done from different locations? Who will coordinate these role holders? Moving on to the third and fourth key areas. What are the essential supplies or services that you need within 24 hours? Who will organise for these supplies or services to be delivered or supplied? Will they be available? And finally, who are your essential customers who may still need delivery within 24 hours? Will you have food safe and in specification stock to deliver to them? What would happen if you couldn't fulfill those deliveries? Would you face penalties? Who will organise these deliveries? Take a moment to consider which customers you would prioritise in the event of an emergency and if stock was limited. And then repeat this assessment on the 4 key areas of processes and equipment, people, supplies and services, and customers for the first and second week after the incident. For example, you may be able to do without some equipment during the first week because you have enough finished goods, but by week 2, this kit needs to be up and running to replace that stock. Or there may be customers who have just received deliveries and they can wait for a few days before their stock needs to be replenished. This methodical approach allows you to prioritize what is critical and what can wait until later in your recovery process, allowing you to concentrate your resources and energy on the truly critical actions. During any emergency, it is very important to manage both external and internal communications to avoid rumours and speculation. It is far better that you are in control of messaging rather than rumours and gossip take hold, which might damage your longer-term recovery and reputation. Your communications plan needs to consider all stakeholders: your staff, customers, finance providers, suppliers, service providers, and contractors, all of whom may be wondering what is going on and whether you will be able to get back up and running. You don't want any of them to panic and think that your business will fail as a result of this incident. So the sooner you are able to communicate with them in a calm and measured way, they will be reassured that you have everything under control. In Module 7, we take a look at how to develop a communications cascade plan. And now we're at the final phase of your recovery plan. After a severe incident, you may want to think about your longer-term future. Do you aim to recover to your capabilities before the incident, or is there a new way of working to emerge? You might consider pivoting to a different business model or downsize to give further time for recovery. An incident can be an opportunity to emerge with different ideas. Think back to how many food and drink businesses expanded their routes to market during the pandemic by offering their own direct-to-consumer e-commerce channels. Or maybe the recovery enables you to invest in different equipment or make modifications to your site which improves its resilience to future climate events. For example, after a flood and whilst the factory is out of commission, you may move all power points to above flood water levels. So take a moment to consider whether a disruption could open the door to innovation or improvements to your business. If you're looking for help to get started on your business continuity plan, the Module 6 workbook contains links to some templates and checklists to assist in this process. And just a quick reminder about the what-if scenarios that we covered in Module 4. Imagining and talking through these worst-case scenarios can help you develop your business continuity plan. We've included some scenarios on this slide. What if you have no power or water for several days? What if your premises are flooded? What if your factory is close to areas which have experienced more frequent wildfire incidents? These are just a few examples of interruptions that might trigger your business continuity plan. This brings us to the end of Module 6, so let's recap what we've covered. We've looked at the financial implications that a climate incident may have on your business and explored some good practices such as cost-benefit analysis, the importance of preserving cash, paying attention to credit ratings, your own, your suppliers, and your customers, and making sure that your insurance is fit for purpose. We've looked at green finance and how this can support your investment decisions and the importance of understanding the risks of stranded assets and maintaining good, robust monthly management accounts. Our review of the legal implications included directors' duties, health and safety, and how to ensure any green claims remain compliant. And we've looked at the importance of business continuity planning and how to break down your plan into key phases of recovery. All of these areas help to improve the resilience of your business to climate change and business interruptions. As we finish this module, here are some reflection points for you to consider. How could climate change impact the finances of your business? Do you already consider climate change risks and opportunities in your investment decisions? Do you need to review your health and safety policies and procedures from a climate change perspective? Who is responsible for keeping an eye on changing legislation, and how is that fed into your business's strategy and planning? If you make any green claims, are you certain they are compliant? Does your business continuity plan consider climate risks? And is everyone in your business aware of and understand your continuity plan? Have you carried out any recent training so that the plan is ready to be activated if needed? In our next session, which is Module 7, we'll be taking a deeper look at the climate change impacts on staff and service providers. Thank you for joining us for Module 6. Don't forget there is a workbook which supports this module, containing more detailed information, insight, and links to useful tools and templates, which will help you with your climate adaptation planning. You might also want to share the training links with colleagues in your business.